All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for available programs and incentives for commercial real estate facilities. This session is going to be with the COG and with Oncor. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with Susan. She's going to be talking about incentives and programs through the COG. And then we're going to have Graham come in and talk a little bit about the incentives and programs that Oncor is going to be offering as well. And then we'll hold all questions till the end because we've made some time for that as well. So let's get started. Susan?
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invite, Salima. It's been a little bit. I am going to hopefully provide some new information, not the standard rebates that you apply for, but some grant opportunities that I think will be helpful to our friends in commercial real estate. Can you advance forward a little bit? So overall, I'm going to be talking critical challenges that we're all working on, ways of doing energy benchmarking, transitioning to a more efficient energy system, and then probably the bottom line, which everyone is logging in for, is available funding. We find as we work across the region that a lot of people want to be more energy efficient. A lot of people want to spend less on electricity, but they really need that initial, just a little bit of a push to make it so everything pencils out. And so that's what hopefully we'll provide some good information on today. Salima, can you please advance the slides?
Sure.
So the governing challenge, and I don't know if you can see this or not, I'm going to move my little thing. So the governance challenge is a lot of building owners, real estate managers, and their tenants are looking at company sustainability goals. Some, and I don't know how many on this call, disclose their energy systems through the Carbon Disclosure Project. Some have stated ESGs in their annual report. Some work towards sustainable development goals. Some identify the 3 Ps. People, sometimes it's prosperity, sometimes it's profit, sometimes it's planet. So there's like a whole alphabet soup of sustainability. The building managers are kind of standing there holding the bag going, gosh, what do I do next? There's other systems. The UN has a really good governance system where you look at all of their 17 sustainable development goals and kind of measure how you're spending money in your budgets that way. So there's a lot of different ways of doing this. More and more we see that tenants are looking at that as part of their decision making on whether they're going to want to lease from this building or another. And so the governance this is kind of the driving. It's coming from the C-suite, but where it lands is usually the facility manager going, gosh, I've got a fixed budget. What am I going to do? Can we advance to the next slide? So here's the other challenge. This is what I call the bottom line challenge. This is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. It goes up to this year. And that nice little squiggly upward trending blue line is electricity per kilowatt hour in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Arlington area. And you can see that, and I started with an article that showed there was about a 10-cent per kilowatt increase just over the last like 5 years. So there have been some significant increases in our power costs. And you could say, well, that's great. I'm on nice affordable gas. Go ahead and click the advance again. Hopefully that one will pop up. Or maybe I gave up on gas. Yeah, so even gas is going up. I think it's around 5 cents now. So we're seeing energy really across the board increasing. And so more and more what that means is that we need to be looking at energy efficiency no matter what that fuel source is. Can we advance to the next slide? So one of the things that I like to see, and go ahead and you can click forward on this, is benchmarking. And it's one of those begin with the end in the mind. If you can't measure it, you really can't manage it. Go ahead and click one more time. And my favorite is there's no value in any data unless you know how it's measured and if it's calibrated. And so benchmarking is really, really critical to your energy efficiency programming. Next slide. So I want to talk about what that transition looks like. And and a lot of you I know are already on this transition. So you know that you need to reduce your energy costs. Where do you start? Do you start with the building shell, the electrical, the mechanical, delivery? Where is that energy hog? And your accounting office can give you the bottom line. You're going to want to start with about at least a year's worth of data so that on what you're spending for energy across the board. And that's really helpful because that way you can see if you've got any seasonal variation. If you can get your hands on more than a year's data, that's even better, because then you can see if the trend that you're seeing for 1 year is trending or consistent over multiple years. We do get some slight variation in temperature and precipitation over a year, and so it'll give you where your trends are. That will tell you your bottom line of what you're spending. But again, where is that expense going? What is your energy hog is really what you're trying to figure out. And what I have found from the city and from working with others is that one of your key first steps is to do a full energy audit. And so that's kind of if you have a governance reporting framework, start there. A lot of folks that are using the International Standards Organization standards in some of the other parts of their facility. For instance, the city does 14,001, which is an environmental management system. 5,001 is an energy management system. The reason you might want to look to a standard framework is it's a really good checklist, and it'll force you to kind of dive in and really see what's going on with your system. TXU has, and other energy providers do have systems that they can help you with. Of course, there is the Dallas 2030 district's favorite Energy Star. It's a great benchmarking and reporting. It also is fairly thorough. The other thing is, while the larger commercial real estate managers typically have a pretty good sized portfolio, they've got this down. Some of the smaller buildings may not have the wherewithal to really dive in and do some of the auditing. There are companies that offer energy management as a service. They will come in and do that audit. They will give you some recommendations on what you can do. And many will likely have programs where you pay an X amount per month to implement some of their recommended programs. I would say do your homework. Make sure that the folks that you are working with are appropriately certified. But that can be another way of addressing this if you just don't have the bandwidth, because I will also tell you, I've done CDP, I've done the American Council on Energy Efficiency. Just getting the data into a format where you can look at it, it can be daunting. And so sometimes having a little bit of external help is a way of getting it done. That energy baseline, though, is critical to you being able to develop effective efficiency strategies going forward. It'll give you a framework for improvement. And I suggest typically taking a systems approach. You're going to want to look at the cost of the different pieces. The other thing is you may have a recommendation to replace equipment with something that's a little more efficient. That said, your building, the building down the street, the building down the highway are all doing this. And so the manufacturers of that equipment may not be able to give it to you next week or next month. It may be a 6-month lead time. And so you really want to take a look at those different pieces and what that supply chain reality looks like, and strategize over time which pieces go in first and which pieces do I order now, but I'm not going to install it for about a year. That the baseline really can help you strategize in that way. The other thing is, and I'll get to that here in a few slides, is look for initial slides that will give you rebates and incentives, because that's that little je ne sais quoi to get you over the hump. Once you can look at getting significant cost savings, and typically it's good to get those cost saving items first, then you can reinvest those savings and rebates into other system improvements. And we typically recommend annual energy audits just to see where you are and see how effective you are. That will help with your reporting as well. Let's move to the next slide. So this is a crawl before you walk. When you talk about energy efficiency and you talk about trying to make your building more sustainable, everybody instantly says, oh, good, we'll do solar. We'll put solar on the roof. And that's a great idea. I have solar on my roof, but crawl before you walk. While it is not nearly as sexy, you may want to do your energy efficiency first, and do solar last, because the most cost-effective energy you have is the energy you don't buy. And so, look at things, look at your energy contract. A lot of firms have long-term 5 to 10-year contracts that are done through a virtual auction to get a good cost. You can purchase green power. Look at virtual power plant situations. Probably the least sexy, but one of the most critical things you can do is double down on your weatherization. How well insulated is your building? Then look at things like lights and switches that can, it's like your mom used to tell you when you're a kid, turn off the light when you walk out of the room, close the door. You don't live in a barn. Mom, way back when, had it right. And then as we talk to different people across the region, as you know, commercial and institutional power during the day, during peak hours, is more expensive. So places like Dallas International Airport have installed storage, and they're looking at, they're doing some kind of cool stuff out there relative to storing heat as energy. And they do that during, they basically stockpile energy during off-peak, and then they turn off their systems during the peak hours. And what that does is keeps them off of the more expensive power. It also helps with programs that implement your power rate based on your average cost over a year. And so if you can keep your average costs over a year down, then you get charged less moving forward. And so that's a really good strategy. And then at the end of the day, you can have the fun ribbon cutting for solar. And hopefully at that point, you're looking at a much smaller array and a smaller need for solar. Next slide. So this is one of my favorite quotes ever, and it's because I tell to myself, I do a lot of talking, and I prefer doing. So next slide. So I wanted to provide some immediate funding opportunities that could be helpful to you. And that includes my favorite 3 agencies, plus the PATUS Authority, EPA, Department of Energy, Economic Development Administration, all have both things on the street right now that can be helpful to you. That said, the Development Agent Administration does not, but they typically put things out on a weekly basis. Those would be grant type opportunities. The Texas PACE Authority, though, is something, and I know we've had whole sessions on this, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but it is a low interest revolving loan program that is really, really helpful and effective. Again, to make the dollars pencil out. Next slide, please. So I'm going to start with the Department of Energy. They've got a couple of things on the street right now that could be helpful. One is the Building Energy Efficiency Frontiers and Innovation Technologies, which is a mouthful, but they're investing in HVAC, in water heating technologies, low cost roof and attic. Again, that's your shell. Looking at making your building more resilient, and lighting. That's another thing that from my time at the city, it's amazing how much you can save just by simply switching out your light fixtures. Unfortunately, that one is due really soon, but it is, I think, helpful. The other thing is, if you're an early adopter, I know the city has several buildings with solar on them. The solar don't think is working. There is grants out there from the DOE on retrofitting some of that existing infrastructure that can help you be more energy efficient. That is an ongoing program that I think is helpful. Our North Central Texas Council of Governments keeps a page of links for ongoing opportunities for tax credits, rebates, that sort of thing. A lot of it is focused more on municipal governments, but there's still some things there that I think would be helpful to you. Next slide, please. So this is where I've been doing days and nights for the last 2 or 3 months. The Environmental Protection Agency is working with the White House Office on Climate. And they are putting out significant funding right now to help the country be more resilient in a climate uncertain future. Our agency is currently working on a community pollution reduction grant program. I want to bring it forward to you all because with the state passing the recent, I think it was 2127, otherwise known as the Death Star bill, municipalities aren't going to be doing much with respect to changing codes to be more restrictive on energy use. They can't. It's against the law. And so there is a focus on what can we do for incentives, how can we help, how can we get the word out on how to actually get to be more cost effective. So we're working under a $1 million planning grant right now. We got it in September. We've been scrambling. It is under the pollution reduction. Actually, it's a climate pollution reduction grant, which is a mouthful. We fully understand that part of the 16 counties that we serve, you can't say that C word. You can't say climate. They don't believe in it. You also are pushing the envelope if you start talking about carbon. But we are in severe non-attainment for priority pollutants, primarily ground level ozone, and we're anticipating particulates. In addition, we do want to implement actions that can help reduce our greenhouse gases associated with climate change. And so we are doing a comprehensive air quality improvement plan for the DFW region, all 16 counties, to help advance some of these EPA desired programs. Next slide. So we're not the only ones. This is a countrywide program. There are 6 such grants in Texas. We've got the DFW area, cities of Austin, San Antonio, McAllen, and El Paso are leading similar area plans. And the Houston Galveston Council of Governments is heading up things down off the Gulf area. In addition, the TCEQ has a statewide grant, and they are covering things that we're not covering. They are doing a lot of incentives around industry and around commercial entities. And so you may want to beam in on their website to see what they're up to and weigh in on things that they may have in their plan that you think would be helpful. Next slide. So we have 3 deliverables, and you will note in red, this is why I didn't get my presentation to Salima until last night. We have a deadline March 1st. That's like in municipal and government time, that's like tomorrow. So we are trying to get everything pulled together into that plan as soon as practicable. Because a month later, there is an implementation grant for the plan that isn't supposed to be done until summer of 2025 that is due on, no fooling, April Fool's Day. And so, and the way that the EPA is shaping this is that anything that gets money has to be covered in that priority action plan. And so we have been talking to small cities and big cities and counties and hospital districts and airports, anybody that will listen to us, or that has ideas that we think would be helpful. And you guys fall in that category to get ideas that should be included in that priority climate plan. We will be presenting that at the Regional Transportation Council the 3rd week in February, so that we make that March 1st deadline. Once those 2 deadlines are met, we will be working on a more detailed climate action plan that will be due next summer. And then 3 years down the road, we will need to be doing a 3rd deliverable, which is kind of like a report on this is how it went, this is what we got done. And I don't know if Lori Clark is sitting in or not, but she and I are kind of working together on this. Both of us are very action focused, and I have no doubts that we will both succeed in bringing a lot of money back to the region for implementation and in getting things done. Let's move forward to the next slide because it has probably more salient information. So we are using this grant to help improve our air quality. That said, we are looking across the board, everything from transportation and energy to how we manage our waste. There is a very strong nexus between water and energy that we're looking at. We've had a lot of people talk to us about urban forestry, urban ag. Can we get a green space plan for across the Metroplex to help reduce some of our heat island impacts? So it is a very wide-ranging project. The carbon removal, just to be clear, we're looking at things like carbon sequestration from trees, not necessarily some of the carbon removal technologies. And the reason being is there's a lot of great carbon removal technologies in the lab. A lot of them have not been proven in real life. And our good friends at the EPA want us to move the needle quickly within the next 5 years. And so we're looking at it, but we're really thinking that's going to be more along the lines of what we could do to sequester carbon. The other thing is this is a multi-departmental effort. a bulk of both our ozone forming pollutants and greenhouse gases are tied to transportation. And so my friends in the transportation department are really focusing in on things I can do. You know, one idea is, well, maybe we spend $75 million and fix every single one of the traffic signals. And this is from a guy that gets incensed with having to sit at a traffic signal for too long because he didn't hit the timing right. So that's one. We're looking at the water and waste and ag stuff in my department. But one of the other key things is workforce solutions, my friends down the hall there, because one of the things that we have identified for all of the areas that we're looking at is there's a very strong need for locally trained staff to do this stuff. We need electricians, we need people that are experienced with mechanical systems, with the fancy solar. So there's a key piece on this for staff development that I think is important. So we are pursuing a competitive implementation grant application on the part of the region. Next slide. And we're talking serious money. And the other thing that gets people's attention is there's no match. So normally federal funding, and particularly grants, likes some local skin in the game. I do think we will be more competitive if we have some skin in the game, but we're looking at anything from 2 million up to basically $500 million. With the Metroplex being the fourth largest metropolitan area in the country, we feel it's appropriate to bring some of that money back to the region and help not just the governments, but our local residents and businesses make those changes that will make them more resilient. And so I've put the link on this slide. We're looking at a lot of incentive programs. To be honest, what we're looking at is probably tier A or tier B, depending on what the state puts in theirs. We don't necessarily want to be competing with the state of Texas for money, but we feel the need is there. We feel the money's there. We certainly should go for it. So that said, those tiers are pretty close to a bulk of our annual agency budget. And so a lot of this funding will likely be in pass-through funds to local governments to support energy type incentives for both residents and businesses. So please stay tuned. Next slide. So the eligibility on these grants, we want to transition towards, it's that C word, decarbonized economy. The bottom line is improved air quality and public health. That really is the primary thing we're pushing. We want innovative things that we can scale up, not just in the city of Dallas, but in other cities. We do need to prove up that we're benefiting low income and disadvantaged communities. We want to create jobs out of this work. And we're looking for gap funding. You know, if there's something that you're doing and you've looked and there just isn't funding in Department of Energy or Economic Development or other agencies, that's the funding we're trying to identify. We don't want to just expand what we're doing with the state on EVs or expand what we're doing with the state on solar or the federal government on solar. So this is kind of where we're looking at. There's no limit on the number of measures. And so we're really trying to push. And so we need two things. We need stuff we want to put in the implementation grant and ask for. but we also need a list of projects that we would like to make sure is in that. I'm calling it a preliminary climate action plan because it's going to be pretty preliminary, but that initial plan that we're trying to get turned in within about the next 6 weeks. Next slide. So this is all the things that we're scrambling to get done quickly, and all the things that are required in this planning grant. So it's not just we need to be nice. We're tree huggers. We're gonna have to prove up that the things that we're requesting funding for are effective, and look at that cost benefit analysis of the funding that's being provided. Our agency started a year ago on developing that greenhouse gas inventory. They did it for the 12 county transportation area. They're planning to expand it to the entire 16 county region. And so we've got a pretty good start on that. But we have a lot of work to do in the next 6 weeks. Next slide. And this is kind of where we're at right now, is trying to get everything quantified. We are starting in on some of the funding analysis. One of the other things is a review of authority to implement. There's a lot of stuff around methane, around oil and gas drilling, that sort of thing, that quite frankly, the COG does not have any authority at all, and nor do our local cities. And that's where it's helpful that the state is doing a similar plan, because they do have the authority to implement on some of those things. And so, like I said, we've got our hands full the next 6 weeks. Next slide. And with that, there's a QR code. If you've got ideas, kindly beam in and leave them. We have 2 different actually we have 4 different surveys. We have community survey, and we also have a local government survey. Feel free to give us your 2 cents worth, or $2 worth even. We will happily take your ideas and run with them. If you have questions, feel free to email me, or I think there's even a place for questions on that website as well. Next slide. And I think with that, we're ready for me to shut up and get stuff going, and Graham can take things.
Before Graham starts, thank you so much, Susan. And these links, I can email it out on Monday. We're going to be uploading this to our YouTube channel. So I'll also send out this final recording as well, or the link too. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Graham from Oncor to talk about programs and incentives on his end.
Lima, I think he's muted.
He's muted. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm Graham Thurman, and I'm the commercial inspection manager at Oncor. And I'm going to start with reviewing a few of the metrics from last year. And you can go to the next slide. And so last year we did 152 projects, which was a little bit lower than normal. I think we're normally up around 200 or more. And we paid out $4.2 million in incentives, primarily lighting and HVAC related, but we are starting to get more and more VFD projects on to control motors. And so that's a measure we really want to see take off. And hopefully people on this call will have buildings or plans to maybe do some of that in the future, because it's a very, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but that's got a very good payback, and we're excited about that measure. You can go to the next slide. And so in 2024, last year we had a program called Midstream that all of our air conditioners and heat pump projects went through, and it paid it at the distributor level. This year we're pulling that program back in, and so all air conditioning and heat pumps, as well as the chillers and the geothermal, anything cooling related, goes through our program now, and we are able to pay incentives on that. It's very easy. So, I'll get into some details later. Lighting related, anything lighting related you're doing, I'm going to recommend that, you hire your contractor or one of your service providers to follow our process, because there's a lot of work involved. But on the cooling and some of the other measures we offer, it's very simple. Pictures and Energy Star and AHRI certificates are what will pay the savings on. And so the inspection process is very easy. A lot of it can be done by desk review if you can take good pictures. So please call us if you've got these kind of projects. We can help explain what's needed. Also, if you don't have time to do it, I always recommend just writing that in your bid, that you expect whoever wins the bid to follow Oncor's process to help you get the incentives on your new piece of equipment. The main thing is you can't remove any of this before the project is entered in our system. So we need to have a project entered in our system, and have your project go through the first couple steps before you remove your old equipment. So the earlier you get in contact with us, or the earlier you start talking about getting incentives from our program, the better, because at that point you haven't missed out on what we're able to pay on. Once it's been removed, we're not allowed to pay on it as part of our rules, because it's considered free ridership, and our programs didn't influence it. You can go to the next slide. And so this year our budget is $8 million, and right now we have about 1.1 that's rolled over, and I guess in the last few weeks we've taken a few projects, so that number's probably a little bit higher, but still have a lot of money to spend. And we're excited about taking on a lot of new projects this year. So like I said, if you've got projects you're considering, or if you've got projects about, please get in touch with us. We'd be happy to help you understand what would need to happen. Like I said, our recommendation is probably going to be to get with a service provider, which a service provider is a company that is signed up in our program, that knows our process, that is going to be able to collect the data and the certificates and be at the inspections and that sort of stuff. But on some of these measures, like motors and cooling equipment, in some cases it may be easy enough that you and your staff at your building could do it. And so we can help you get through that as well. You can go to the next slide. And so this is more just, we had our kickoff 2 weeks ago. And it was a more detailed version, because it was targeted more towards our service providers, which are the companies that are submitting the projects and doing the work. And so, if you need a more detailed version, we have that on our website. Today, I'm doing more of a condensed version, because I understand most of you are building owners, and probably just want the details as to what we have available and what you can do to have your contractors get you incentives for your projects. So the program opened in December. The kickoff was 2 weeks ago, and it'll run through December of this year. So like I said, that $8 million is still available, most of it, and we'd like to see projects. You can go to the next slide. We do get evaluated. The Utility Commission's hired an evaluator that audits a percentage of our projects. So that's the reason that we do pre and post inspections, is we have to establish what the baseline is, based on the existing conditions and equipment, and then, follow our rules to where we pay on the demand and energy savings that the Utility Commission has allowed us to pay on. And so when they audit us, they inspect us similar to how we inspected the project before we paid on it. And this is just sort of a disclaimer that's why we're following the process, is we have to survive, the audit and turn over the data to establish that we're paying out the funds correctly. Next slide, please. And so these are some links to our EEPM site. It stands for Energy Efficiency Program Manager. This is where a lot of our resources are. The technical resource manual is the sort of the rule book that we have to follow, that has a lot of the calculations for, how we're to calculate the payments and the savings. And so these are just some links as to where you can find that if you need more detailed information. Next slide. Here, this is sort of, the dollar amounts we pay on. We pay for lighting, we pay a 15-year measure life. So these values you see don't really mean much, because it gets extrapolated over 15 years, and that's what your one-time payment is. You can go to the next slide. and this is more just listing sort of things that we pay on. But here is an example. So say you have 400-watt metal halides in a warehouse. Obviously, yours would probably be in different areas, but whether it's outside or in a warehouse, and you're replacing it with 130-watt LED, that particular situation, you'd be looking at about $120 a fixture from us. So if you've got 50 or 100 lights in your warehouse, that adds up pretty quickly. We do a lot of parking lot projects. I'd say about half of our projects are outdoor lighting projects, just because that's where high wattage is typically. And so 1,000-watt metal halide in a parking lot replaced with a somewhere around 250-watt LED, that would get you $320 a fixture. So and we have calculators that on our site that can help you estimate that to where you can put in what your total project scope, or you can just put in a rough estimate per fixture, and it would help you estimate that. Obviously, if you need help on that, you're welcome to call one of our program managers, and we can help you, show you where those calculators are, and they are on our EPM site that I had the link to a while ago, but we can help you go through that if you need help. And the last slide will have the program manager's information and phone numbers. You can go to the next slide. And so here's a few more measures. These are, popular cooling measures that we have. I know a lot of you probably have one of these cooling types in your buildings, and we started seeing a little bit more VRF, variable refrigerant flow. We'd like to see even more of those projects. But we do occasionally see geothermal and water-cooled DX in some of these buildings. But again, if you're thinking about doing a project, or if you're getting some bids or whatever, feel free to contact us. Or like I said, I always recommend, writing in your bid documents that you want the Oncor incentive to help with the payback, and that whoever wins the bid will need to either sign up or follow our program process to help you maximize the incentive that we can offer to help your payback. So again, if you need us to help explain that to whoever you're going to hire, please, sooner, the earlier you can get us involved, the better, to make sure it's a successful project. You can go to the next slide. And these are just a few other measures. I've highlighted the VFD measures. Just this year, we got the two that say new. We were unable to pay on those two in years past, and we see those done quite a bit when people are doing VFDs on the motors in chiller plants. And so thankfully we have those now to where we can also pay incentives on those, since we often see that holistically they're all being done when somebody goes into a chiller plant and adds the VFDs. But and if you go to the next slide. Oh, and one more thing, I'm sorry. We do pay towards the bottom the lodging guest room temperature setback controls. I don't know, I doubt anybody here has a hotel, but we don't see people take advantage of this very often. And this is one that a lot of people I don't think know is available, but we do pay if you're putting those kind of controls in some sort of a lodging situation. And so that can add up too if you've got a bunch of rooms. Next slide, please. And so here's some examples, like I was talking about. On the first one, it's a VFD added to a cooling tower, 25 horsepower at a hospital chiller plant. Just for that simple, couple pictures on the pre and a couple pictures on the post to document what was installed. The incentive on that would be around $3,500. And a lot of times we see when that's being done, they're also doing the distribution pumps. And so there's some examples of that too. A 10 horsepower distribution pump in that same chiller plant would be about $1,000 incentive from us. And so, the payback on that's pretty good. I highly recommend, if you're thinking about doing that or getting bids on that, make sure they go through our program and take advantage of the incentives. We just have to, the only thing is the project has to be in our system before the VFD gets added. So just make sure they don't do the install before we've gone through our process. Next slide. Okay, and so this is going to be just a little bit of detail on our inspections. So we're doing a lot of stuff on photos now. We need, as I've talked about, the service provider is the entity that's submitting your project. And so typically, most times the most successful ones are, if you're doing a lighting project, usually the lighting contractor or the electrical company or the companies selling you lights that came in and did the audit to determine what they should sell you, those are typically the ones who are most successful as a service provider on a lighting project. And so those, that's who's responsible for being the expert. When myself or my team comes out, we're just there for you to show us, we're going to usually look at a sample of what you've done or what's been turned in where you're asking for money. And we're going to look at a sample of that, and it just needs to match up with what you've turned in. And so we need someone there to be the expert on what they've submitted. And, most times as the building owner, you're just the customer who wants the new lights or the new equipment. And you may not be the expert on exactly what they're selling or what we need. And so I always just recommend and just, if somebody's going to submit a project for you, make sure that they understand that they need to be the expert and represent that at our inspections. So this is just some detail as to what they need to collect. Used to, we collected everything on site the day of the inspection. We've made it more simple now to where they can collect these photos documenting the wattage on the existing lamps and fixtures, and profiles of some of the areas to document whether there's occupancy sensors or air conditioning. Those are all things that factor into the savings that we can pay. And so if they can collect all that ahead of time and give that to us in photos consolidated into a PDF document, it makes the inspection a lot easier, because we already have a lot of the photos and details, and it's just a matter of going out and making sure that the rooms exist and the quantities of fixtures exist. You can go to the next slide. So post-inspection, same thing. It's mainly documenting the LEDs that were installed. We need a photo of each LED type. It's got to be a model number that's on the back of the fixture. Used to, we had to do that at the day of the inspection. And so someone had to have a lift, and we had to go up to each fixture, and the service provider had to open it up or get us up to it to where we can get a fixture of the nameplate. Now, we've made it a lot easier to where you can get those photos during your install and turn them in when you submit your project for post-inspection. So I always recommend, make sure your lighting installer knows that, when they're taking those fixtures out of the boxes, or, before they mount them, go ahead and get some of the photos that are going to be needed, and, house them on your computer. And then when it's turned in for post-inspection, you can submit the photos, and there won't be a need for a lift and ladders at the inspection. It's going to be more just a formality of, spot checking some areas to make sure those are the fixtures that were installed and the quantities match. You can go to the next page. So same thing with HVAC. It's really simple. We do most of it based on photos, just a profile photo of the unit or of the chiller or whatever the new piece of equipment is, and then a nameplate photo with the model number and serial number. And then we need some kind of an AHRI certificate or submittal at AHRI conditions listing the efficiency and the cooling capacity. But that's for HVAC and cooling equipment, it's a fairly simple process. Next slide. And this is just more. This is more cooling information. So again, just a couple photos to represent the new piece of equipment, and then your HRI certificate or equipment submittal. Next slide. And so this other measures, that would be the VFDs and kitchen equipment, other things that aren't lighting or cooling. Same thing, we're doing that based on a desk review for the most part. And again, it's just a profile of the piece of equipment, and then model and serial number of the new, whether it's a VFD added. We just need to see that it's been added, and we can help you understand that. We've got some examples if you are to do like a VFD project or some other project that's not lighting or cooling. We can help you, show you what photos would be needed to capture what's needed to document that the VFD wasn't there, and then on the post it is there, and you've got the model and serial number. Next slide, please. And so this is to help people understand, we typically don't like to be put with the customer. We have a lot of providers that are out of state, and they'll say, oh, I'll just put you with the customer. And I mean, sometimes it's okay if it's a simple cooling project, or which most times we don't even have to come out for a cooling project, but say it's a lighting project that's simple in one area, that might be okay. But if it's a big building, typically, we prefer the person that's submitting the project, the entity submitting the project, to be at the inspection so that they can be the expert on what they turned in. A lot of times they'll try and put us with the customer, and even though the customer knows their building, they don't don't fully understand what was turned into our system and the detail that's been given to us. And so sometimes there's some confusion and some frustration. So we're just trying to give some suggestions here as to what we prefer to see on, when an inspection is submitted, who's going to represent the project and the details. Next slide, please. And this is more just kind of documenting what would be needed at the inspection. This is more for lighting. There is not a need for lifts and ladders if good photos have been provided. So, most people are doing that nowadays. They're doing a good job of getting the photos we need ahead of time, submitting that, and then at the inspection, there's not a need for the lift and the ladders. So it makes the inspections easier and less invasive for the customer. Next slide. Outdoor lighting, we've got to verify that the fixtures do operate. If more than 10% of the fixtures are not operable, we're required to reduce the baseline. So this is sort of a disclaimer saying that on outdoor lighting projects, we're going to need the service provider to turn the lights on for us so that we can count the number that are inoperative. And we're looking at the conditions as they exist the day of the inspection. So that's how it's going to be looked at. So if there's a bunch of fixtures inoperable, if they're not fixed with a lamp or whatever the situation is before we come out there, we've got to count them that way. We're also looking, if there's existing occupancy sensors, that factors in on the hours and coincidence that we pay on. And also, is the building conditioned? We have people turn in warehouses a lot, and they'll mark them as conditioned, and that inflates the incentive. And when we go out there, and they're not air conditioned, we have to make that adjustment, and so the savings go down. So those are some things that we prefer it if your service provider can get that right before they turn that in, so that the estimate is correct. Next slide. LEDs, they have to be either Energy Star or DLC. DLC stands for Design Lights Consortium. So those are the two third-party entities that we're required to ensure have them listed as qualified. And so we're looking at the model number on that. And so again, when the post inspection's turned in, you're required to submit a photo of each LED model number from the fixture that's on the fixture, either on the back or on the lamp. And so that'll be matched up with the Energy Star DLC screenshot that's submitted with the project to represent that fixture. And so as long as the model numbers match, then then that fixture that's sufficient for that fixture being qualified. And so whatever the wattage is listed on that screenshot is what we're going to go with as for the calculation. We do pay on Type C tube LEDs. And that's there's got to be a driver associated with that. And it's got to be listed on DLC as a Type C. And we pay $6 a fixture on that. You can go to the next slide. And so this is an example. So that's on the left, that's a label of the model number on the back of the fixture. And so that's been turned in. And then what's also been turned in is a DLC screenshot from their website representing that model number. And so that's what would be required to support that. So if that's the wall pack you installed on your building and you did 20 of them, you would just need one picture to document what that is. And then you would need the screenshot to prove that that's qualified by DLC and what the wattage is. You can go to the next slide. We don't pay on plug load or track lighting. So sometimes, we recommend if you've got a hospital or a hotel or something, I mean, most of the time there's not a lot of savings in the rooms. And so it's better to leave that off and just submit the common areas like the hallways and the lobbies and things like that have more of a lighting load. Typically in the rooms, there's a lot of plug load. And so we're unable to pay on that. And the amount of time and effort it takes to go and get into rooms to do inspections, a lot of times the minimal savings on a situation like that is not worth anybody's time. So, if you have plug load or track lighting in certain areas, again, that's not something that we're able to pay on. We also don't pay on the Type A and Type B TLEDs, just Type C. You can go to the next slide. So again, on HVAC, whether it's a chiller or VRF or air conditioner, we're paying on it based on the AHRI conditions. So anything 20 tons and less, we require an AHRI certificate. So smaller, 20 ton and less air conditioners, AHRI certificate is what we would need for each model number on the job. For anything bigger than 20 tons, or for VRF and or chillers, we'll go with the submittals. And so, whoever your manufacturer is, we just need them to provide, or if I was you, I would ask them to provide you a submittal at AHRI conditions. And so that's what you would turn in to represent the efficiency and cooling capacity of your unit. Chillers pay really good incentives. So I know a lot of you probably have that on your buildings. And so if you're retrofitting that or adding one, please make sure they consider our program, because the incentive on those is, sometimes very significant and can help with the payback. Next slide. And so this is just the program managers. These are the numbers that if you've got questions, or if you've got potential projects, or you want to have a discussion with your contractor about something that you're considering, please feel free to call us. Like I said, the earlier you can get us involved, or to get your questions answered, the better. I always, our job is to help everybody and help them have successful projects. It's just tough when somebody calls us and says, "Hey, I'm pulling my piece of equipment out tomorrow," or "Hey, we're disconnecting all our lights tomorrow. Can you guys come out for an inspection?" And we can't do that because, at that time, usually there's not even a project in our system, and a lot of the signed documents and scope and things like that are unknown. And so it's with the load of other projects we have that are ready, it's not likely that we're going to be able to jump and do something like that. So again, please always make sure to, if you've got questions about whether we can pay an incentive on something, or whether you want to put a project through our program, please get us involved ahead of time. And like I said, these are our program managers and our help desk, and they can get me involved too if needed. But we want to be able to help you and help you be successful. And again, my number one thing is just make sure, we hear from people sometimes, the lighting contractor or whoever, that'll say, "Well, my customer's asking me to do this. I'm not getting paid for this, and I wish they had told me this ahead of time, because there's a lot of work involved in this." And so I would just say, that there is some time and effort involved in doing a lighting audit, or doing what we need especially for lighting. So just make sure you put that in your bid, to where they understand ahead of time, if they win the bid, that they're going to be responsible for this. And then that way there's no questions later if they're being asked to meet us for an inspection, or to, come up with some of these pictures that I showed.
Graham, I got
that's all I had. So I'm open for any questions.
All right, Graham, this is Mark with EIS Lighting. Do you have any type of program for when you put in solar lights for a parking lot light?
I'm sorry. What was the question again?
Solar lighting. Do you have any program for outdoor solar lighting?
No, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, we don't. For whatever reason, that's not something we're able to pay on right now. So I guess I should have probably listed that on that slide of ineligible.
Okay.
But yeah, at this time, solar lighting is not, it's not something we can incentivize.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have some questions. Folks have been texting me. This was a great session. Thank you so much, Graham and Susan. Susan, there are a couple of questions for you on my end. You talked about all these grants, and you talked about programs. How can private buildings get involved in all of this? Do they have to go through the COG? Are they named in the grant? Can they go apply on their own? I guess the question is, how can we take advantage of it as maybe the Dallas 2030 district, or as individual buildings? Maybe you can answer that a little better.
That's really a great question. And it's kind of, unfortunately, there's a nuanced answer. And that is, the EPA is funneling money through states and local governments. And they're funding a limited number of grants. That said, we're looking at enough funding in the grant that we anticipate in particular, the incentive programs being funneled through our local cities. So I see Carlos with City of Dallas is on here. Most likely the day-to-day administration on that would be through our local governments. We will find out if we're successful on our April application mid-September. And so we anticipate initial funding availability, and will likely do like a call for projects in the first part of 2025. That's when it would be helpful to know, yes, we would love to have some incentives. And we will likely, as part of the CCAP, and it's not the Dallas CCAP, but the regional CCAP without the E. As we develop that plan, we will be going out for input in what those actions really look like, and getting commercial real estate input into what would be helpful is critically important, because we do want to shape these funds so that they provide regional improvements, so that we get regional energy efficiency. We have been looking at, particularly on the greenhouse gas emissions side, commercial versus residential versus other forms of energy. And so it isn't done yet. That's why the input is really helpful, because we haven't shaped these programs. And if there's a strong desire from our friends in the commercial real estate world to get some help on energy efficiency, like Oncor, we need to know, reach out, ask us. I'll be brutally honest, we don't have money right now. We don't have programs right now. This is something that is under development. And that is probably both an opportunity and a constraint. It's an opportunity because you can help shape what that looks like. And it's a constraint because it isn't already figured out.
Well, what
Graham had a great list of here's all the stuff we can do. We're not there yet on this particular incentive program. I anticipate down the road it'll probably be something similar to what Oncor is offering, but we don't know that yet.
maybe on specific things like electric vehicles or whatever the case is, maybe I can connect with you one-on-one and we can kind of figure
Yeah, sure. Well, as another
collaborate.
example, Graham has said, we don't do solar lighting. Well, that's a really good example of a place where there's a gap in funding. Maybe that's something that the region takes on.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think that answers the question, because I think that, these GSA buildings and city buildings and county buildings are getting all these funds, but how can the private buildings, because they're also, wanting to get one step closer to the 2030.
Absolutely.
They participate.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we'll connect probably, outside of this conversation and talk more about that. I think James had a question. James, are you still here? And do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
I guess I can.
Perfect. Go ahead.
The question was, are there any incentives now or anticipated in the future for measures targeting peak demand reduction and or software such as distributed energy resource management or DERMS? And the comment is that this has been a focus for the Texas legislature, the Utility Commission, and ERCOT. So I would expect it to show up in the technical resource manual.
Okay, go ahead. Is this a Graham question? Or a Sue question?
You can go first.
Well, what I'm going to say is I know that we've been in contact with the state because we don't want to put things in the local plan that's in the state plan. And I know that they are, in addition to looking in particular at industrial applications and methane associated with the oil and gas industry, they are looking at various measures around making the grid more resilient. And with that, I'll shut up and let Graham talk.
Yeah, well, I think, and again, I don't have anything to offer on recent, maybe recent discussion down there, but I mean, I know they're looking into that, but I know our programs are, I mean, the whole crux of our programs is paying on peak demand reduction. So most of our measures that we offer, that's what our calculations are looking at is what we, you know, what's the peak and what's the peak offset wattage wise. And that's how our calculations are factored. So, you know, as far as measures go, you know, if one that I know that we do see sometimes that I didn't list today, it's a custom measure, is the ice storage or thermal storage with your chillers. We do have a few projects every year that do that. The problem with that is you don't get paid. You have to wait and do your logging for a whole summer. So June 1st through September 30th, you know, is what you're looking at, and to prove what the peak offset is on your chillers if you are going to do that strategy. So if you have such a project, I mean, I know that's not exactly what you asked, but that would be a load shifting type project. We do see a few of those every year. I know they're looking. EV was mentioned a minute ago. I know we're looking at EV and seeing what we can pay on that, and we're working with a lot of big entities here in DFW on collecting data, and we're kind of partnered up with them on some pilot programs right now when it comes to EV. I mean, if you've got other specific questions, feel free to email me or reach out, you know, but as of now, I don't know of anything beyond that. So as far as software and what you mentioned a minute ago, I know we're not doing that or involved in that, but a lot of times there's entities working with the commission to come up with new measures. Once those measures go into our technical resource manual, then we're able to start paying on that. So we're always excited to get new measures, and hopefully in the future we'll see more of that.
So Graham, you're saying that the EV incentives are, you know, stay tuned on that, or is that something
Yes.
you guys have kind of created a pilot program? And if you have a pilot program on that, would you like us to help you with that as well? Because we have a lot of buildings, so we're not really
Yes.
sure how we can help in this process.
Yes. So I would say if you have a specific somebody who's interested, I think our pilot program right now is working with you know, very large entities like DFW Airport and several others. I don't know if it's still open, but I know they were trying to get 10 or 12 of those, and they've been collecting data with them for the last year to try and come up with something. And so if you have somebody that's interested, let me know. I can get them with the right person. I don't, you know, I don't think it's fully open right now, you know, as far as it's not an official program, but I know they are trying to collect data from persons who have a large number of EV chargers, or places where you know, a large amount of data can be collected over the course of a year. So if there's somebody here that has something like that, feel free to reach out and I can connect them with the right person.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, no, because we have, you know, we've got large building owners and we've got those small ones as well. And so I thought it would be a good opportunity for Oncor and the building folks to kind of connect there, because there's a disconnect in funding, and not just funding, but knowledge, and, you know, how to implement, and, you know, what kind of comes out of it. So that would be good. Let me connect with you outside of this on the EV part of it.
Okay, and I can definitely get you the program manager's name who's working on that. And
why don't you email me that? That would be great, and I can reach out and have that conversation. That's awesome. That's great information, because that is the future.
Yeah, well, and that might even be a future topic on you know, a monthly topic, you know, where he could come and present that. Like I said, it's not an official program yet, but he can, you know, he could probably give you a better idea and details as to what we're trying to maybe accomplish.
Yeah, you know, we have our first 20 minutes of our meeting. We can definitely, I'm sure a lot of building folks would be interested in, you know, what's coming up, and, you know, how long it's going to take, and what kind of incentives will be out there. And then on top of that, you'd get some feedback from the building owners in return, saying, hey, this is what we're looking for. So that is a great idea. And yes, if you could connect me with that person, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. If I can follow up, and Graham, on my solar lighting, I'm a school in Flower Mound's looking to put in a dozen solar poles. There's no lighting in the parking lot right now, so this is all brand new lighting. And I got a city looking to do the same thing, about 20 light fixtures, all solar. So everything would be off the grid. So
Yeah, so that's as of now, we're not, that's not part of our, I guess following the rules, we're not allowed to pay on that. I guess it's not connected load that, from the way they look at it.
yeah. Well, it would be load that's not there, that's not going to go on. I look at it from that way. So, all right, I just
Yeah,
thought
no, I mean, obviously the customer I mean, it's a great situation and a great project, and a lot of customers going to benefit from that. I just, unfortunately, there's not a way for us to pay on
I'm
that
just trying to
right
help cut costs.
Mark, if I might, please check our Environment and Development website. There is a link on one of the slides, I think. We do have some outlines on that website of funding that's available to schools. So that might be helpful to your client.
Thank you, Susan.
Great. So if there are any additional questions, you can email me those questions and I can get it to the right person. I will be sending out the recording and hopefully a PDF of this presentation because it had hyperlinks to it. So hopefully we can share that as well. But I know a lot of people hopped off because they had to get to another meeting. But thank you so much for your time, your participation, and all your questions. And hopefully this was a very productive and informative session for everyone who attended. But again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I want to thank the speakers. Thank you so much, Susan. Thank you so much, Graham, for taking the time. And I want to thank you for everything you do for the Dallas 2030 district. We really do appreciate it. So I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful weekend, and I'll get all of this sent out on Monday.